2 of Psych Revolution, Weaponize Your Mental Health podcast. I want to say thank you to everybody who reached out last week after our first episode. You gave us a lot of really great feedback and helped us for today. So today we're just going to go over basically what cognitive dysfunction is and how that ties into mindfulness practices to help you through your cognitive dysfunction. The trigger warnings for today's episode are as follows: self-harm, which includes self-mutilation, alcoholism, purging and binging, which is also anorexia and bulimia,
Honey, I'm recording.
drinking, and I don't know if I said drug use already, but that is under that umbrella. Suicide and suicidal ideation is something that may always come up on this podcast, so we just kind of want to make sure that y'all know that out there. And then let's see, last but not least is going to be abuse. So the abuse that may be discussed today is physical, emotional, and psychological. Sexual abuse will not be a part of that. I want to make sure that that's very clear to everyone, that is not a trigger warning for this episode. So moving forward, we're going to do what we did last week, and which is what we're going to continue to do, is called Beauty and the Beast. And that's where, Matt and I, you can do this with your friends or do this by yourself. Pick one thing that you're proud of for the week, and 2, something that you've been struggling with for a week. Usually you want to try to keep it to under 5 minutes, usually, because it kind of keeps you from getting into a cyclic, circular sort of thinking pattern. And it keeps you keeping things succinct and to the point. So last week, Matt went first. So this week, I will go first. I will start with my beauty. Very much kind of like last week. My beauty this week is doing this podcast. Earlier this week, I was, my beauty and the beast are actually kind of the same thing. Last week, I was diagnosed with, I'm not going to say the medical term, it's confusing. But basically, I have nerves impinged in my neck, which caused a great amount of pain along with my fibromyalgia. So movement and researching and all of that were really hard for me this week. But I was able to find a way through it, and here we are. So before we go into Matt's Beauty and the Beast, I just want to reiterate, because him and I spoke about this before we started the podcast, that abuse will be talked in this podcast. And I just want to make sure that the listeners know that. If you are somebody who is a survivor of emotional, psychological, or physical abuse, and you are still triggered by that, now would be a good time to tune out. So now that's been said, moving forward, Matt, why don't you tell us what's going on?
All right, so I'm going to start with the beast, and this is a long one because it's going to be a bit illustrative of my journey. So, beast has been mental health basically since I was a kid. As a kid, just like emotional, psychological, physical abuse from my mom, her various boyfriends, just fucking decades of trauma. And at one point, I was about 15. My mom walked in on me doing something, decided I needed to see a psychiatrist who was one of those boomer jagoffs. The reason why a lot of people in our generation have had a distrust of mental health. So likely caused me problems I didn't have prior. And then all the other shit continued, this, that, and the other. And then fast forward, I graduate high school. At a certain point, this is after spending years self-medicating, for lack of better terms. And then I drop out of college, join the military, and basically run away across the country for 2 fucking years. And I mean, there were good experiences, but there were also several things, including, and it's amazing because the person and I are really great friends now, but easily one of the most horrifically toxic relationships I've been in outside of my own fucking bloodline. But, that's what coming from household abuse and medicating with your own substance abuse will fucking do every time. So, and all this time, because of that negative experience I'd had back as a teenager, and also the existing toxicity of being a straight male, and that institution's view on mental health, never seeking anything, just thinking, no, everyone around me is weird. I'm not that fucked up. Or, oh, people come to me to help. I'm their rock. I'm their anchor. So I must be doing fine. And just, still, because I'm associated with my own family, to some extent, still that manipulation and abuse always existing. And so just compounding. And so about 2 years ago, I started going through therapy. And that first round, it's not that the therapist was bad. It just absolutely tore open, unlocked everything, every bit, how bad what I knew was, shit I didn't know. Like, everything just fell the fuck apart. And so then, like a year ago, I want to say I started on meds. And then now that part of the treatment plan is no longer working. So now I'll be talking with the psychiatrist to pursue a formal diagnosis so I can fucking figure out how to fix it. And I mean, part of me loves that there is crazy, because that's where being an artist comes from. But do you want to run shit, or do you want your crazy to run shit, is what it comes down to.
Absolutely. So would you say, like, kind of like me this week, like your Beauty and the Beast are kind of like one and the same? Like, it sounds like what you're saying is that, like, you're really happy that, like, you're getting to a point where you can maybe finally start to put a pin in things and maybe learn more about your diagnoses and how to deal with them. But at the same time, you're at where you're at because of what you went through. And that's really shitty sometimes. I also do come from a past of multiple decades of different types of abuse, and you're looking at the product of that right now.
Yeah.
And I'm 5-6 years into that journey of finally, as an adult, being like, WTF. And I'm going to tell you, some aspects of it get easier because you get better at dealing with it, but the journey itself doesn't get any easier. No. It is a constant uphill battle. And you do have some days where you just dig your heels in the ground and put your hands on your hips like a 2-year-old that doesn't want to go to sleep, and you got to deal with it. So,
and I mean, I happen to somehow have it through my partner's health insurance. Like, we're just really blessed that these visits aren't costing anything and the meds are cheap. So at least as I'm flailing around in the dramatically unnavigable mental health system, it's like going into a fucking Genius store and asking for help. At least I don't have to worry about the financial burden of it. And I'm like, this is why the homeless never get better, because not only can you not fucking figure it out even when you're in it half the time, as you know, but they ain't even got resources or a net there.
Absolutely. Well, me personally, I do wish you the best of luck with your appointments coming up. And I actually do applaud you for, taking that plunge and taking that step to be an advocate for yourself, especially when it's a system that's as confusing as our mental health system, to, take that step to finally be like, well, the only way out is through. So I have to find my way through this shit. And part of finding your way through that shit is going through the shitty mental health system. So props to you. And I really do hope that, through our podcast, you share your journey and how it's going for you, if you're comfortable with doing that. Because I feel like there are a lot of people out there that are kind of on that precipice of, oh shit. And, sometimes hearing somebody else going through it, doesn't necessarily make it any easier for your journey, but it definitely normalizes it and makes you feel a lot less lonely, because, like we talked about in the last episode, mental health is stigmatized very, very deeply and very largely on a very big scale. So, being able to hear other people go, hey, I might be crazy, but I'm still cool and I'm trying to do something about it. You know what I mean? Is refreshing, at least in my perspective. Something else we did want to touch on is Matt and I are, for lack of a better term, we're kind of a little rough around the edges. We both have the mouth of a sailor. A lot of the time we talk about things in a matter of fact manner that other people may find rigid or abrupt or triggering. So if that ever happens, Matt and I are very pliable. We're very malleable. We want to make sure that everyone's comfortable in this space. So if that ever does happen, please do not hesitate to either DM us or, even comment on the page. We do ask that you be nice and compassionate about it because, we're coming at it from an open space and we hope that you do too.
Telling me you didn't like something is 100% valid.
Yes.
Being a dick about it is not.
No, we won't. We're not about that. So yeah, moving on. Also, really quick, round of applause for Matt for doing that. I'm sorry. I will be your biggest cheerleader when it comes to that. I think it's really great that you're doing that. So to kind of segue into the next portion of the podcast is we're going to be talking about cognitive dysfunction. And we touched on this a little bit last week when we were just kind of talking about emotional dysregulation. To kind of shine some light on that, cognitive dysfunction refers to, and this is like the technical term, I'll break it down, but the technical term is, it refers to a decline in attention, verbal and nonverbal learning, short-term and working memory, visual and auditory processing, problem solving and processing speed, and motor functioning. Now, this is a major symptom in major depressive disorder, as well as other mental health disorders. So basically what that means is for your working memory, which is one of your brain's executive functions, it's the skill that allows us to work with information without losing track of what we're doing. So basically what that means with cognitive dysfunction is that there are gaps in between that. You have a hard time recalling or remembering information. It's almost kind of like, in a way, like you have like temporary ADD or ADHD. Somebody can tell you something and then 30 seconds later you turn around and you cannot remember what they've said. Motor functions are also affected by that. And it also, that basically means like your reflexes or like your voluntary or involuntary muscle contractions, which can also mean like for involuntary muscle contractions, like that could mean digestion. The way that your intestines work, they move that stuff along with the muscles. And if you're really stressed out and your motor functions and your cognitive stuff is breaking down, that means, that your body isn't processing food properly. Your sugar levels aren't the way they need to be, which also means like your liver, your kidney, your pancreas. So many things get thrown out of whack when things aren't working well up here. And some of the core cognitive skills are basically the way that your brain thinks, learns, remembers, reasons, or pays attention. So when you're dealing with cognitive dysregulation, your ability to do most of those things on like a day-to-day basis goes out the window, which is why people who suffer from major depressive disorder or other mental health disorders don't get out of bed for days at a time. They don't eat, they don't shower, they don't eat, they don't feed their cat, they don't, you know what I mean? It literally disrupts the way that you think. Some signs that your cognitive health may be on the decline, and Matt, feel free to chime in at any point in time if you yourself have ever experienced this.
Oh,
I already know the answer to that.
the entire last fucking week.
Right?
Oh, quick note for everyone. Just so everyone knows. So the hat and the sunglasses, that's you. Everything else is the fucking support system. So if this ain't right, the rest is gone.
Gone. There you go. So, some signs of cognitive decline are forgetting appointments and dates, even if you write them down. Even if you set an alarm on your phone, sometimes I set an alarm on my phone and it'll go off. And within 3 minutes of setting the alarm off, I don't remember that the alarm has gone off. Forgetting recent conversations or events. There have been times where I've been really triggered. I don't know about if this has ever happened to you, where I lose time. I dissociate.
Mm.
And sometimes, yeah, sometimes that's due to the fact that I'm at a social event. I'm triggered. I'm overstimulated. My body's way to protect myself is to dissociate, and then I lose time. Sometimes feeling increasingly overwhelmed by making decisions and plans. This happens to me all the time. I'll be on the phone with somebody's birthday's coming up. They want to go out and do something, right? And, I say yes. And then it starts getting closer and closer and closer to the date. And I start freaking out. Or it's just the fact of being asked the question. Like, have you ever been out with your friends and you're like, oh yeah, let's go grab food. What do you want? And because you're the picky eater in the group, all of a sudden you start like freaking out because you're like, that is a
No,
sign.
I would get so anxious I would actually vomit.
Yeah, that's actually super common. I had a friend in elementary school, my fifth grade teacher. I won't say her name, but she was a horrible person. And she was very mean to us. And I actually had a friend who, whenever the teacher would walk behind her in class while we were taking a test, she would get so nervous and so triggered, she would forget what she was doing and she would break out in hives on her hands. So, yeah, things like that can be extremely detrimental to your health and to just your functioning as a human being.
Well,
Um,
if I see older than me, larger males start like screaming at other people, I'll flip out.
yeah, definitely. Um, I'm sorry, I'm getting slightly distracted. I have
Okay.
a cat in my room and she's screaming at me to get out of the room and I can't get up and let her out right now. So I apologize in advance. She's at the other door. Thank you. Sorry about that, guys.
I was gonna say
Um,
she could come give us her thoughts about cognitive dysfunction.
I'm pretty sure she has some of that herself. Losing having a hard time understanding directions or instructions. That's also a really big sign of cognitive dysfunction. Losing your sense of direction, losing your ability to organize tasks, getting too overwhelmed with something that might seem simple to other people, but to you, it's like an insurmountable, mountain that you have to climb. And lastly, and this one is kind of an umbrella because this one symptom is in a lot of other things, but it is becoming more impulsive. And the reason for that is because the back part of your brain, which handles all the cognitive functions, once you become cognitive, once you have cognitive dysregulation, your prefrontal cortex kicks in. And your prefrontal cortex is everything that handles, emotions, impulse control. It's one of the reasons why, teenagers are so impulsive because their prefrontal cortex has not finished developing. So they don't have like the control that normal people do. So when you have cognitive dysregulation, that part of your brain shuts down, and now you're only using the front part of your brain, which is completely impulse, and can be kind of scary, to be completely honest,
Hmm.
depending on what
Oh,
your choice of impulsiveness is. Um,
um,
for some people, it's promiscuous sex. For some people, it's driving really fast and irrationally. For some people, it's drug use. For some people, it's alcohol abuse. For some people, it's all of those things. But yeah, I just wanted to touch on a little bit kind of like what cognitive dysfunction is, what it affects, your executive functions. um and yeah, moving on. So there are actually 8 habits you can use to improve cognitive function. And I actually found this on a really cool website. It's called the Free Mindfulness Project. The website is freemindfulness.org. It has tons of downloadable mindfulness activities that you can do, ranging from short ones that are only 2 or 3 minutes to ones that are, 10 to 30 minutes long. There's different types, like breathing exercises before bed in a triggered state. I'm about to go do something important. And I kind of like this one because it is a non-for-profit. So I don't know. Maybe it's just like my own bias, but I kind of prefer things like that over like certain mindfulness apps, because with a lot of those apps, for you to actually get the mindfulness activities that are helpful to you, you have to pay for them. And this website is completely free. This website goes into 8 different habits to improve. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the habits, and what I want to do is once I go through one of them, I'm going to have me or Matt chime in and say how, whether we were aware of it at the time or not, doing one of these things helped us. So the very first one is physical activity. And the reason why physical activity is really good is because it releases certain hormones in your brain. I might be pronouncing this wrong. I'm apologizing in advance, but I think it's called irisin. And it's been clinically proven to actually be able to help improve memory and cognitive function.
Um, Actually, I'm going to talk about an unhealthy way I've done this.
Okay.
I still laugh about this one. It's high school. I actually skipped out on a date. Like, I literally, like, I was on my way, but I just slapped my skateboard down and fucking rolled out and just went on this insane skate session. It's like, I felt better afterwards, but it's like, looking back on it now, I'm like, that was hilariously unhealthy because it happened multiple times.
I mean, I guess that depends on your definition of unhealthy. Because I mean, if you really think about our school system and how archaic it is and how they teach everybody the same way and expect them to learn it, that, maybe that was just your brain's way at your age being like, you don't need to be here right now. We're going to go do something that's going to be way better for you.
Well, no, not even skipping school. Like, there were like dates or potential dates with girls, hanging out with actual friends. Nope, I'm gone.
Hey, man, that happens sometimes. I've definitely done that.
It wouldn't been. It wouldn't. I probably wouldn't be saying if it was unhealthy if the skateboarding had paid off. I was never that great, but what I lack in talent, I more than make up for in passion.
I was gonna say, yeah, if it's something that you love to do and it's something that you dig, do it, man. Okay, so the next one is openness to experience. And this is one that I struggle with. It's important to get out and to do something that's unfamiliar and mentally challenging for you, because it provides broad stimulation mentally and socially within your brain. And this is something that I personally have experienced. Every single time there's a fire spinning festival or anything to do with fire spinning, usually up until about an hour before I go, I've convinced myself that I don't want to go for my own personal reasons, which most of them aren't true. And then I actually kind of like force myself in a way to like get in my car and drive to the festival or go do whatever. And I'm stuck in unfamiliar, situations, which sometimes may be uncomfortable because they're unfamiliar. But every single time I end up leaving the festival, I end up leaving with like more friends, a great experience, great connections with people. And I will say it was terrifying, especially dealing with what I have to deal with mentally, to go and do these things. But sometimes it's easier just to take that leap and go out and do something different. It takes your mind off of things. It pulls you out of yourself. Have you ever done anything like that, Matt?
Honestly, I disassociated just now.
Oh, dissociation happens.
It happens. At least I can admit to it.
Hey, I mean, that's a big thing. Being able to sit there and be able to name what just happened
Yeah.
is half the battle.
Yeah, please admit to disassociating. Stop pretending you were listening.
Yeah, no, totally. No, I mean, that's communication on your part, letting the person that you're communicating with know, hey, I care, but I literally did not hear the last 30 seconds of what you just said. Can you repeat it? I've definitely had to do that on some occasions. I don't do it with all my friends because sometimes I feel like all my friends won't be as understanding, but I definitely feel you on that. Thank you for verbalizing that. Um, Number three, to tie into the one that was before it, is curiosity and creativity. It's found that reading books and writing and playing instruments may actually
Yes.
preserve your memory. I couldn't really find any research on that wasn't just like a whole bunch of medical jargon that I'm not trying to spew on this podcast, nor am I trying to explain. But
Find your art,
basically,
do your art. It's important no matter what, because
yeah,
it doesn't matter if it helps your brain, it helps the soul, the space dust, whatever the fuck you call it. It will feed and nourish what makes you you.
absolutely, absolutely. And hey, if it promotes your memory, I mean, that's a win-win for me. Um, the fourth one is social connections. Feeling isolated can actually disrupt your sleep, increase your blood pressure, um, causing you to, when you wake up, already have cortisol in your system. And those of you who don't know what cortisol is a hormone in your body that gets released when your body is in fight or flight mode. It increases your heart rate, it increases blood flow. So if you need to run and go, you can. But the issue with that is that over time with chronic stress and that gets applied to your, into your system, it can actually cause um, in some cases long-term heart damage. For some people it can screw with your blood sugar, it can screw with your sleep, it can screw with your moods. It can, for me, with someone with fibromyalgia, if I have a really stressful day and I know that cortisol is in my system, I know tomorrow is going to be hell
Yeah.
because
And
it is torn through my system.
from a mental health standpoint, that's the reason why people who are either long term or even former military cops and gang members are constantly so fucking keyed up because you're permanently trapped in that mode.
Oh, absolutely. 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 My ex-husband was in the Marine Corps, and you know, even a couple months after they came back from their tours, they were like constantly amped up. And because, you got to wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning and you're not done until 5 o'clock at night, and you're drinking all of this coffee and chain smoking all these cigarettes, you know
Mhm.
what I mean? Like, I, I hate to compare it to this, but like it was like they were almost like rabid dogs in a junkyard. Like all it took was a pen dropping, and like all of them were like, what? Like all of them turned into Chad.
I,
Um,
and my thing is like, so I've got the abuse on one side, but it's like okay, it wasn't a gang, but it was street activism with an anti-racist action chapter in that matter. So it's that military, and I worked in corrections. It's like I had literally all three backgrounds that feed into that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's a hard cycle to break because, in a weird way, it's not necessarily that your body gets addicted to it, but your body gets used to it. So when you're trying to calm all of those cascades of all of those hormones and those neurotransmitters and those, chemicals in your brain, and that's what your body's used to doing, it's really hard to break that cycle, which is
Walk,
great because we're going to go into mindfulness that
yeah.
helps you
I,
go through that.
I wanted to make one last
Oh,
comment
of
on that.
course.
Walking away from the security industry was the first step I took for my mental health. And any of you that are in the security industry, and if you feel you need this podcast, you should also re-examine your employment for your own good.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. Wholeheartedly. Um, so really quick, just to go back into the social connections, not being socially connected and not having like a pack for some, not all, but when you're in cognitive dysfunction or emotional dysregulation, um, can actually disrupt your normal day-to-day brain function, which is huge. Like huge. Like your mental state is so dysregulated that your brain is not working properly. So that's kind of why I wanted to bring that up, because, cognitive dysfunction can be very, very debilitating, which is why once we finish kind of going through like these 8 steps, we're going to do a mindfulness practice, and we're going to go into talking a little bit about what mindfulness is, because mindfulness allows you to basically tell your brain to shut the fuck up, and allows you to be present in the moment. And for me, the most important thing about being present in the moment is not only being present in the moment for the other people around me, but being able to be present in the moment for myself and be able to enjoy the moment for what it is, instead of having my shitty committee up here constantly telling me what's going on when that's not really what's going on. So I'm really hoping that the mindfulness discussion that we have in a little bit really helps some people, because when I first got introduced to mindfulness, it was really frustrating, but once I got the hang of it, it really helps me out. The next one on the list of 8 is mindfulness meditation, which we kind of just already went through. And then another activity you can do is like brain training games, like sort of like stimulant rich environments, problem solving, anything that pretty much kicks your critical thinking into gear, because that shuts off the certain parts of your brain that are run by your emotions at that point. So it kind of like in like it's a trap sort of way. It shuts down a part of your brain and lets you use another one. Something that I used to do, which might seem kind of weird, is I used to do times tables sometimes when I knew I was overregulated. I would like go onto my phone and find ones that you could fill out with like your phone. And I would do like the 1s and the 2s and the 3s and the 4s. And by the time I got into the 5s or the 6s, I would have calmed down enough to where I could either decide to leave whatever issue I was dealing with or deal with that in that moment, because I was causing the logical part of my brain to kick in and my emotional part of my brain was shutting off.
I wonder if that's why a safe space for me is to get hyper engaged in socioeconomic and political situations.
I mean, your brain does things in a really weird way without telling you why it's doing it. So, I mean, that could be a very, very large possibility. I know a lot of friends who have lived through trauma and then find out later on in their adult life, something that they've been doing since they were a kid, like stimming or whatever, is actually something that their doctor, their therapist is now telling them to do, but their brain automatically thought of it because they needed it in that moment. So I would say that's completely and totally possible. And I mean, hey, it works out for you because it's a subject you really like, you're really passionate about, right? So,
and it's the other podcast I'm on now.
Right? Rock on. So the second to last on the list is kind of a no-brainer, but I don't really think a lot of people realize how detrimental this could be, and it's getting enough sleep. Now, Lord knows I never get as much sleep as I want to. But what ends up actually happening, and when I was doing the research on this, I actually like, instead of doing like 2 or 3 sources like I normally do, I did like 5 or 6 because I was like, I don't know if I believe this. But crazy thing happens when you don't get enough sleep. So what ends up happening is, so your brain is like a sponge, right? It's in that fluid, right? And it's got a lot of surface area. And that surface area allows all of the reactions to go off in your brain to tell your body to do what it needs to do, right? Well, when you don't get enough sleep, the volume, basically meaning how much that sponge is filled up with fluid, actually decreases. So not getting enough sleep literally shrinks your brain.
Oh.
Did you hear that? Shrinks your motherfucking brain. And if that doesn't make you want to go home and listen to some Enya or whatever the hell you listen to try to meditate and go to sleep.
ASMR.
Yeah, right. Because it can definitely cause major deficiencies in pretty much any type of functioning, executive, motor, cognitive, all of that gets fucked up with lack of sleep. And it also, affects your mood. Like, I know if it's PMS week or I'm on my cycle, I haven't eaten and I didn't get enough sleep, Lord, you better hope there's somebody there to throw some sort of chocolate at me, because if I get upset, I'm just saying, a whole new version of me that a lot of people don't get to see comes out.
I'm gonna call Fish. He'll help me bury the body.
Yeah, right. And then lastly, this
I'll
one kind
just
of,
I'll just tell you it's a long damn drive to PA.
yeah, right.
But we
Um,
have mine shafts, so you don't need to bury anything.
right. Um, so lastly, the last one is reducing chronic stress. And I know a lot of people are like, well, duh. But there was actually a study done in 2014 at UC Berkeley, which is local for me, that chronic stress can actually trigger long-term changes in the brain, which can lead to cognitive decline, which also explains why a lot of young people nowadays are extremely prone to mood disorders and anxiety disorders, because they haven't been taught coping mechanisms to deal with chronic stress. Um, it inhibits like connections to the prefrontal cortex if you have long-term chronic stress exposure. It's all bad, all bad. And some things you can do to reduce chronic stress, for me, one of the biggest ones is learning to say no. A lot of my life has been being a people pleaser for a myriad of reasons that we won't get into right now. So I'd say yes a lot to a lot of things that I didn't want to do. And then all of a sudden I would get stressed out about it, and the normal life stuff would happen. And it would just be me perpetuating this constant cycle of being stressed out over everything. Until I started saying no. And I didn't start doing that until about a year ago. And it sucks because sometimes it means I don't get to see my friends as often, but it's also really cool because when I do see my friends, I do want to see them. You know what I mean? I'm not going out of obligation. I'm not going out of, you know, whatever reason. But Matt, do you have any things that have helped you out to kind of help like reduce any sort of chronic stress in your life?
Um, one of my one of my issues, because it's actually an issue, is I am what I call a textbook people displeaser. Like if I don't want to see you, I don't want to fucking see you, and I'll tell you that and not care. If you don't like me, I don't care. Like that's like it's the reverse. And like there were a couple times in my life, and I'm like, why don't I have many? Oh yeah, because sometimes I'm kind of a prick.
Aren't we all? Aren't we all?
Because if I
Um,
don't like you, you know. And I've gotten better about, I don't need to tell them I don't like them, but I also don't need to act like I'm cool with them.
no, setting boundaries is important. It's very important. I wish I
unless
was better
it's
at that.
Yeah, unless it's someone that I think is absolute trash. It's like, fuck you.
And
Oh,
the horse
oh
you rode
shit, you were
in.
my boss. There goes my job.
Oops.
My bad. Just playing.
Right? Psych. April Fools, not April Fools. Okay. All right. Well, I guess now we're going to go into, I don't necessarily want to call it the DBT portion of the podcast, but we're kind of switching from that discussion into actual like skills um, with mindfulness. So to kind of kick this off, like we said last week, we're going to do a mindfulness exercise every week. I'm going to do the same one for about 3 to 4 weeks, and then I'm going to move on to a new one, just because I know when you're first learning how to be mindful, it can get frustrating sometimes to try to stay focused. So I kind of want to give people a little bit of time to maybe get used to one, or give suggestions, whatever. So we're basically going to do the same thing we did last week. And if you weren't here last week, what we're going to do is for 2 minutes, we're going to do a breathing exercise. And what you're going to do is you're going to breathe in for 4 seconds, hold your breath for 6, after the inhale. And then you're going to exhale for 7 seconds. And when you exhale for 7 seconds, your goal is to try to get all that air out. So I'm going to go ahead and start my timer for 6 minutes. Something that I suggest that you do is, regardless of how you're sitting, try to take an open and willful stance, which means usually palms up like this, sit on your knees, or whatever. If you're sitting in a chair, you want to try to make sure that your feet are flat on the ground so you can be grounded and stable in your stance. Something else that you can also do is called a soft eye stance, where it's like you kind of just gently close your eyes. But if you're someone like me, doing that sometimes can be kind of triggering. So if you're not comfortable with that, I suggest kind of finding something bland to stare at, the floor, your shoe, something, just to kind of keep your attention on that throughout the mindfulness practice. All right. So we are going to go ahead and start in about 5 seconds. Go ahead and, stretch your neck out if you need to. Try to remember to keep your shoulders dropped. I'm not good at that. And here we go. Breathe in for 4. Out 6. Or hold 6, excuse me. Out 7. In 4. Hold 6. Out 7. If you find that your mind is wandering or you're having a hard time concentrating, that's okay. Every single time that happens, just try to put a pin in that in a non-judgmental way. You can come back to it later. You're going to continue to breathe in for 4. Hold for 6. Out 7. Got about 20 seconds left. All right, try to get one more round in. All right, all done. Ooh, that was actually kind of nice. Last week, I felt like I was like all over the place doing that exercise. And this week, I found out I feel like I was like a little bit more grounded, which I kind of find funny because I am currently on a very high dose of steroids for my back. So even though I
Hey.
seem somewhat calm internally, I'm like, wow. So, yeah, that was really nice. That was really nice. How'd you feel about that one, Matt?
Um, Pretty good. I mean, because I've had a lot of fucking felt like bees are inside my blood all damn week.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. So I'm so happy that that helped you. And it doesn't always have to be for 2 minutes. Sometimes, like, even with hanging out with friends, and I know that I have 30 seconds in my car before like somebody sees me, or like I have to go to the restaurant or whatever, whatever, whatever. You know what I mean? Like, even just doing it for 30 seconds in your car and just doing a couple of those rotations, that almost like hyperventilative like effect that it has on your brain, like it's almost like a high when you're done, you know what I mean? You're like, oh, I feel good, like it's almost like taking like a CBD dab, like you're done and
Right.
you're like, I can cure cancer. Like it just makes you feel so good. Whoever knew that O2, the oxygen, could be that amazing. So yeah, let's move on. I guess we should all ask ourselves, what is mindfulness? Those of you who don't know listening, here you go. Mindfulness is bringing your attention to the here and now. It is also noticing and accepting our here and now thoughts, feelings, and sensations in the here and now. Observing our experience in a non-judgmental and compassionate manner. Remembering that not everyone is the same, and extend the same compassion to yourself and to others. Purposefully turning your attention from the past and the future to the present. And why that is so important is because in the past, people deal with feelings of disappointment, shame, guilt, the why cycle of why did this happen to me? Why did da 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 da? I've done it. I'm not shaming anybody, but the depression that is associated with your past is wired to that. So if you're constantly stuck in the past, you're what? Constantly going to be depressed.
Yeah.
Being able to be in the present in the present moment also allows you to maybe take a different stance on that of the past and be able to look at it in a way of my past gave me wisdom and perspective to be where I'm at now. And it kind of allows you to have a non-judgmental stance on yourself. And by doing this, over time, it doesn't happen immediately. It didn't happen for me. It took me a couple of months. You start to have hope because you're so used to living a life emotionally dysregulated or whatever your reasoning is to want to, start using mindfulness, that you get so caught up in the toilet bowl cycle that is your life. You know what I mean? Like, you kind of forget what it feels like to have hope for the future. You know what I mean? And for yourself. And I really feel like mindfulness just kind of like brick to the face, like helps you out with that. And what I mean by brick to the face is very abruptly. In case you didn't get that. Why practice mindfulness? To remember that sensations and thoughts and emotions, this is big. To remember that sensations, thoughts, and emotions are transitory. They're not permanent. So as much as you feel like in that moment after you just got dumped that things are never going to get better and you're never going to have a good life, that's temporary. Because every day it's going to get easier. And that applies to all life situations. Practicing mindfulness helps you tune into the present moment so we can best address it. And what that kind of touches on is you're addressing in that moment what it is in that moment. You're not addressing it with all of your triggers and all of your other stuff that comes along with baggage, you know what I mean, into your current situation, which is hard for some people. Like, I make a joke with my friends that I come with carry-on, overhead, under the seat, and baggage in the next plane. Like, that's the amount that comes with me. So when you're dealing with things like that, sometimes it's really hard to let that go, to live your present life. And mindfulness really helps out with that. Which goes into this next point, is it's to not miss out on life. Living in the past and future can be exhausting, and it is, and overwhelming, because it is. And it can sometimes feel like there's no breaks and you feel like there's no way out. But here's the thing, and Matt and I have talked about this on multiple occasions, the only way out is through. So eventually you're gonna have to deal with it, regardless of how much you don't want to. Here's a caveat about that, though. There's no way to be mindful all the time. It's a practice. It's not something that you become an expert in, or something that you finally get a gold star and like a little ribbon that's like, hey, you're mindful. No, it's a constant practice, constant practice. Very much like meditation or yoga or sports or anything. Like, you have to practice it to become good at it. So something that mindfulness kind of helps bring together is the two sides of your brain, the reasonable mind and the emotional mind. And a little joke that I like to make about the reasonable mind is it's like your Vulcan mind. I'm a huge Trekkie. It's void of all emotion. It's rational, logical thinking. It's just the facts. It plans things. It organizes things. It's kind of the cool and detached part of your brain. Whereas I'm losing my notes. The emotional mind is also like the human mind, so to speak, right? A lot of the time, your emotional mind as opposed to your logical mind is the one that controls you. Your emotional mind is the one that wants things now. I want it now. You know, like that JG Wentworth commercial. I want my cash now. Yeah,
It's my
just like
trash and
that.
I want it now.
Exactly, exactly. And a lot of words that come to mind when thinking about the emotional mind, and I don't know, Matt, if you can think of any more besides these, are passion, devotion, love, hate, sacrifice, impulsive.
Art.
So when we act with our emotional mind, we tend to be very reactive. We're reacting to the situations instead of responding to the situations, which usually means you're coming from an emotional standpoint, duh, and usually isn't always the most conducive for the situation. Your emotional mind can be affected in a lot of ways that your logical mind can't. And some of those ways are lack of sleep. Ding, ding, ding. We just talked about this. Lack of sleep causes issues. Your brain shrinks. Jesus. Time of day. Time of day is definitely something that I have to deal with. Those of us who have borderline personality disorder, there's something called the first 30. In the first 30 minutes of the day, because most of us wake up in a triggered state, like, which is really shitty. The first 30 minutes of your day are extremely sensitive. So if a roommate wants to come up and talk to me about, you know, the electricity bill is going to be higher this month, that is not the time to have that conversation with me. Um, Other things that can affect your emotional mind are drugs and alcohol and problematic behaviors,
Mm-hmm.
over and under eating, lack of or too much exercise. There are some people who use exercise in a toxic way to distract
Mm-hmm.
themselves from their problems. Environmental stress or threats, and other people in relationships. Other things that can also affect those are hormones, regardless of sex or gender. Hormones are hormones. And sometimes they turn you
Period.
into an asshole. You know what I mean? Be aware.
Everyone
Pain.
is an asshole sometimes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No one's perfect. Pain for me, with someone with fibromyalgia or other people who have chronic physical disorders, pain can be a huge proponent in being an asshole.
Uh-huh.
Um, Biochemical factors can change your emotional mind. You know what I mean? If you have some sort of mental health disorder that you are not getting help with or you choose not to take medication for, that could have a negative effect on your emotional mind.
Or your treatment plan's presently falling the fuck apart.
Yeah, there's that. There's that too. That is very valid. That is very valid. So now that we talked about the two separate sides of the mind, we are going to go into what in DBT they call as the wise mind. And the wise mind is basically like the integration of the emotional mind and the logical mind, right? It's kind of when both of them are like 50-50, right? Um, but something to take into consideration is you cannot overcome your emotional mind with your logical mind or vice versa. So if you go and you try to do like, you know, math problems like I was doing and you calm the emotional part of your brain down, you're calming it down, but you're not taking it over and you're not shutting it off. And that's
Mm-hmm.
something to remember. Um, it when using your wise mind, sometimes it involves stepping back, slowing down, and reflecting. And sometimes that means if you're in a situation where you know that things aren't going well, you have every right and is totally valid, regardless of the situation, to tell that person, stop. I cannot talk about this right now. Because it's better for you to continue that conversation when you're in a wise mind or calm state than when you're firing on all cylinders and you want to tell somebody a few things about themselves. Um, Also, another thing to remember is your wise mind is yours and yours alone. So that more kind of goes along the lines of people who compare or are afraid of other people's opinions. That's definitely something that I deal with. That's very hard. Where, you know, like the lack of sense of self. You know, sometimes even when I'm thinking with my wise mind, I compare it to other people's, or if other people are going to approve of it, or if other people are going to agree with it. And sometimes that kind of makes it end up shutting off and my emotional mind taking over. So remembering that your wise mind is yours and yours alone, and to trust your gut is the most important thing because you know you better than anybody else. I mean, hell, I know that. I'm stuck inside here all the time. I can't go anywhere. Wise mind also allows you to consider your long-term goals. And this is kind of a big deal for people who deal with emotional regulation is you are here in the now, but you're here in the now in the reactive and impulsive way. You're not thinking about your long-term goals. And by being able to slow down and use your wise mind, it allows you to be able to look at the whole picture, which then in hand a lot of the time, not always, allows you to look at not necessarily like a long-term goal of like years ahead, but you know, for some people, a long-term goal is like in 2 weeks, I want to be able to pay my rent on time. You know what I mean? And wise mind is where there is truth, where there is center. So wise mind, and what it means by that is it's where the truth is from a non-judgmental stance. You're not adding in your own caveats, your own judgments, like me and my partner got into an argument because he was pissed off because he did this and I did this and blah, blah, blah. And that's not a non-judgmental stance. A non-judgmental stance is you came home, you sat on the couch, you started talking to me. The conversation didn't go well. And now we're at this point.
Yeah.
That's a non-judgmental stance. Adding in all of that, it's subjective.
Yeah, there's objective, shit went sideways. Subjective, shit went sideways because of now you're subjective.
Absolutely. And some things to help yourself with starting to become mindful is using the what skills. There's what and how skills. And the what skills are observe, describe, and participate. So that basically means like observe. I am sitting in my bedroom. Describe. My light is bright. I have an orange shag carpet. Participate is more in social situations, but getting that non-judgmental observation technique of what is going on really helps you engage in your surroundings because it switches off that emotional part of your brain and it engages the wise mind. So you're not making judgmental statements that aren't necessarily true because they're based on your perception. Something also to remember about those 3 skills that I just described is they can only be applied one at a time. You can't do all of them at once. You do all of them at once, and that kind of eliminates the whole point of being mindful. So the observe is basically learning how to live in the moment. Describe is putting words on our experience, labeling a thought, a feeling, a sensation, a sensation. Labelizing, not analyzing or interpreting, because analyzing and interpreting is subjective. It's based on your perceptions of the situation, not the situation in entirety. Observe and describe often happen right after each other, which kind of helps when you do it that way because it kind of gets you into like, you know, a pattern. Participate. Participate is about quieting the mind enough in the now to be totally present for what's changing moment to moment. Either completely into a current experience, become one with the activity or experience, and letting go of self-consciousness. Like, you know, musicians, dancers, performers, yoga teachers, you know what I mean? Like they all have to let go of that to be present in the moment to do what they're doing. And then you also have to do that to partake in it. So, let's see. I want to show you guys something really quick so you know what I'm flipping through. I showed this to Matt earlier. So when I talk about DBT is not a, you know, let's all sit in a circle and talk about our life, okay? I went through DBT in August of 2019, and you see how long it's taking me to get this whole thing together, so I just want to make sure you guys understand. This is my DBT binder. This is a 3-inch binder with 6 months separated by week, because it was 24 weeks. I mean, it was a lot of work, but there's a lot of really, really, really good information in here, which is why I'm sharing it with all of you. And it's also why I'm not going into anything like super, super in depth, because 1, I'm not qualified. I don't have that type of training. And 2, these podcasts would be like 2 or 3 hours long if we wanted to do that. And I have things to do in my life. So we went through the what skills. Now we're going to go through the how skills. So the how skills describe your attitude and approach to being mindful. It's, once again, non-judgmentally, acceptance of what is as it is because it is. I'm going to say that again. Acceptance of what is as it is because it is. It's not about qualifying or quantifying something as good as bad. It's doing one thing at a time and being present. And it's focusing on what could work effectively. And I want to make like a little caveat about that when it comes to saying effectively. A lot of people like to use the words healthy or unhealthy. And I think that's a very subjective term, because for what might be healthy for one person may not be healthy for the next person, which is why a lot of the time you'll hear me say not effective or effective, because I feel like that is way more of a well-rounded, precise way of explaining what you're trying to do in that moment, as opposed to healthy and not healthy. Self-harm is not effective, right?
No.
Right? Talking to your friends about your issues when they arise is effective. You know what I mean?
Right.
I don't know. I just feel like it's a little bit more specific to the situation.
Right.
So it's really hard because a lot of the times we often react to the interpretation of our judgment of a situation instead of the situation of itself. And, you know, a very long time ago, which has changed now, I would see somebody pulled over by the cops and I would automatically assume, oh, well, the cops are there, they probably did something wrong. You know what I mean? It's learning to look at a situation without adding your own personal judgment into the situation, which is very hard. When you actually start to try to do mindfulness, it does get frustrating at times because you have to kind of keep telling yourself to shut the fuck up, because like you're sitting there trying to be non-judgmental and then you are, and then you kind of have to be like, that was ineffective. Shut the fuck up. That's not what's going on.
Dude, stop.
Yeah, exactly. And it also keeps us from being judgmental on ourselves. Judging turns our pain into suffering, because a lot of the pain that you feel when you're dealing with your own trauma or you're dealing with your own mental health is the judgment and the shame that you put on yourself. So learning how to be mindful and not do that with other people also helps you not do it with yourself. Don't judge your judging is also a really big one. Give yourself some compassion. You know what I mean? Like if you're trying to be mindful and you're taking the steps to do what you need to do for yourself, yet you still find that you're having judgmental thoughts, mindfulness is a practice. It's not precision. It'll happen over time. Just be, graceful with yourself. You also want to try to do, like we tied in with the what skills, is you want to try to do things one at a time. You can actually influence the present by focusing on what's happening now. And what I feel like that kind of means is kind of like what that whole non-judgmental stance is. If you're all tied up in yourself and you're being judgmental while you're hanging out with your friends, are you really there?
Nope.
Are you really having a good time? Do you want to be there?
Hell no.
Well, you take that time to be mindful or do a little mindfulness exercise before you go in. And now not only are you changing the present for your friends, but you're changing the present for yourself. And that's really, really, really important. And another thing too is we actually accomplish less. Statistics show we accomplish less when we try to multitask. So realistically, doing things one at a time and being mindful with yourself is actually one of the most effective and productive ways to deal with yourself and life, because regardless of what anybody says, you can't fucking multitask. It's not physically possible. So stop trying. Another part, once again, be effective. Focus on what works, staying away from. Like start staying away from words like what's fair, what's unfair, what's right, what's wrong. Speaking in absolutes is a big one. I know, Matt, I've said this to you before. I don't speak in absolutes. I don't say you need to, you should, you could. Because when you speak in absolutes like that, not only are you linking your ego into the situation, but you're also judging and putting unneeded and unwanted pressure on the person that you're speaking
Right.
to, which is ineffective in all ways. Don't play by the rules. Don't get stuck on how things should be. And this is something that I get stuck up on all the time. A lot of the times when I get into my pity parties, I'm like, this is not the way things should be. I'm 34. I should have this. Half my friends are married. And once again, that gets you stuck in the toilet bowl of your life. Be flexible in your approach to someone or something. Ask yourself, what happens if I reserve my judgment or emotions? Be more open with other people about your judgments and emotions. Open that dialogue with your friends. And if you do open that dialogue with somebody and it turns out to be like not a safe space, one, now you know that's not a friend. Two, you know that they're not somebody you should be talking to about that. And three, it gives you, in a way, a distress tolerance skill to, use the mindfulness in that situation to, help yourself deal with it. Let go of vengeance, useless anger, and righteousness that hurts you and doesn't work. What does your wise mind say? This is a big one, I think, for some people, as well as like the should or you need to, is I feel like that sense of like righteousness of like, this is how things should be, or how I feel like they should be, that when it doesn't happen that way, all of a sudden the sky is falling.
I think most of us abuse survivors are like fucking half made of vengeance.
Agreed. You just gotta keep stuffing it down. No, I'm just kidding. That's why I do my art. Lastly, what you want to do is you want to ponder. Remind yourself that you can accept something, but that doesn't mean you have to approve it. It's just acknowledging reality. This is huge. I'm going to read it again. Remind yourself that you can accept something, but it doesn't mean you approve of it. It's just acknowledging reality. So you could be wronged by somebody and they don't see it and whatever, but you need to radically accept in that moment for yourself that this is what it is. It doesn't make that person right. It doesn't make you wrong, but this is just the way reality is. And in DBT, dude, my therapist says it to me all the time. She'll be like, Kelly, this is a moment to use radical acceptance. And I will tell you, I legitimately have thrown a fit sometimes because I'm like, no, they did it first.
This is messed up.
Exactly. And, I get on my own pity party tip and, lo and behold, later on in the day, what am I doing? I'm radically accepting the situation. So I know that was just like a quick dump of, just some information about mindfulness. I do really want to reiterate the free mindfulness project freemindfulness.org. I do want to reiterate that to everybody as a tool. You can also go on to YouTube and just Google mindfulness activities. For some people, it's nice just to have like background noise. So, I know that there's like 8-hour long like rain sounds and stuff like that on YouTube.
I sleep to those.
Yeah, so do I. They're amazing. So there's definitely a lot of resources out there. I do also want to apologize. Because of my flare up in my neck this past week, I was not able to put the suicide prevention hotline numbers on the page. So I will.
Don't worry because the same link card that I put on the last episode will be on the page in the links below every single episode we put up. So on your way to like, subscribe, share, you make your way down to that link card. It's all of our resource links. Also, for anyone who is interested in the other various things that I do on the internet, including the ways outside of YouTube to get a hold of us, all that info's there too.
Oh, okay. Awesome. Cool. Matt's the computer guru in this. I can barely get my iTunes to work half the time. So yeah, that's where we're at right now. And lastly, last week, Matt shared an album that really helped him through some times. And so his was last week and mine is this week. And my choice this week was a really big proponent for me, I think, to kind of just like busting out of my shell in my prepubescent into teenage years. And that was Green Day's Dookie album.
Yes.
Green Day's Dookie album, definitely. Because before I started listening to that, I was still into like the Backstreet Boys and NSYNC and pop. So like I hadn't really gotten into like any punk, any rock, anything. And yeah, that album blew my mind musically, but also I pretty much like my freshman and sophomore year, every single time I had like my Discman with me at school, I had that CD in it. It was like the only fucking thing I listened to. So we will definitely post a link for that.
To hell with any of y'all cool kid Green Day haters. know that at minimum half of the bands you love right now got their start at that fucking Green Day tape.
Yep. This is very true. Gotta love Green Day. And of course they're local. Like I said, I live in the Bay Area, so I've eaten in the same restaurant as Billy Joe. His mom, like 15 years ago, this kind of ages me, but anyways, 15 years ago, I was at this restaurant called the Embers in El Sobrani, and I was there. I was like hungover with some friends, and we were eating breakfast, and this like old, like not little old lady, but like this older lady, like, you know, comes to the table and she takes our order. And this guy that almost looks like a bum, like walks in and sits down at like the diner bar, and there's no one sitting there with him. And he's got his hood up. And I think he was wearing like a Carhartt jacket that was like all like dirty. And he takes the hood down and I look over and it's Billy Joel. And I was like, oh, you know, like I'm fangirling, right? So this woman comes back, our server comes back to the table, and she like sees me like looking at him and looking at him and looking at him. She sighs and she goes, "So you know who that is?" And I was like, yeah. That guy saved my life. Like I love I love their music.
Like
and she was like, well, go ahead.
My number one safe space band, Anti-Flag, is the band they are, because what they became is mainly what they've become. I think is mainly driven by the addition of Chris number 2, and his start was that Green Day tape.
Yeah. But yeah, so anyways, she comes over, she says all that. I'm like, yeah, I liked it, whatever. And like she kind of sighed. And I was like, I think I was like 18 or 19. And like I kind of like looked at her and I was like, what? And she was like, well, that's my son. And I was like, wait. He's Green Day and you're a server at
a diner.
Right? And she was like, her response was so cute. She was like, I make my own money. And I was like, oh, okay. And like she went over
and
to
that's
him.
what punk rock is.
Yeah, and she went over to him and like I saw her like say something. He looked over to the table, and of course when he looked over at the table, like I'm all like, you know, totally dorking out. And apparently he was also hungover and wasn't really feeling the fan interaction, which was totally fine. I didn't care. I got to eat in the same restaurant as him. But yeah, that was my Green Day experience of just being able to sit there and be like, we're both hungover. Give me fried food. Yeah. Fuck the world.
Just kind of holds his coffee towards you, then I'm gonna go die in the corner now.
Yeah. He was in and out of there super fast. Like he ate and was like out super fast. And he drove away in this like beat up like 1996 Corolla. And I was like, I love you. Like, I love you. You are amazing. Like you have all of this money, but you give it away to everybody else. And you're the lead singer of Green Day driving off in a beat up Corolla. Love you.
Meanwhile, 15 and Op Ivy and fucking Screeching Weasel and every other Lookout band is able to actually get their rights because Billy Joe was just, I'm the pop punk fucking Santa Claus.
Yeah, right. Yeah, he's definitely good for that. So I think that pretty much ties out the podcast for this week. Once again, if anybody has any questions or suggestions or any other resources that they themselves have found, I do ask that you do filter them through Matt and I before you post them on the page. If it's like a song or like a skill or something, like that's fine for you to post. But if it's any sort of like research or anything that's like specific to your diagnosis, please shoot it through to me and Matt first, just to make sure that it's appropriate and goes within our disclaimer as non-medical professionals. But besides that, next week we're going to be going into, I believe, distress tolerance, as well as some other topics. Once again, if there's anything that you're interested in that you would like Matt and I to talk about, please let us know. Feel free to DM us or, post it on the page. Just once again, remember, add trigger warnings. We are trigger happy here.
Yes, we are. And musically, I'm telling y'all because it's a lesser known album. So if anyone wants to find and listen to it over the next week, we're going to do the album Normal by the Homeless Gospel Choir. And if you listen to it, it connects to this week's pick.
Nice. All right. Well, I guess that's the end of week 2 of Psych Revolutions podcast. We will be releasing the podcast pretty much every Saturday or Sunday night. So it's available on Monday mornings for Mental Health Mondays. But feel free to listen to it throughout the weekend.
Yep.
And yeah, besides that, remember to stay safe, be nice to yourself, and be nice to others.
Yes.
All right, everybody. You guys have a great week. All right. Peace out, everybody.
Deuces.